tab for Q&A. So I would request all of you to put questions in that particular Q&A tab. Maybe there are 3 dots. If you click on those dots, then you'll get Q&A tab. And if you have not registered and you have straight away came through link, I would request you to write your name, email address, and organization for us to keep a record and give you follow-up after the session completes. Also request to watch at the chat box because we will be posting the biographies of all the speakers and the panelists there. And I would also request all the participants to post questions only in Q&A window so that we only look out there for your Q&A, and for information you look at the chat box. And also at the end, please wait because there'll be a short poll which we would like you to click and answer and get the results of. Thank you, and I'll give it to our Senior Director at CSE, Dr. Suresh Royala, to take over.
Welcome all the participants, speakers, panelists who have joined today for this webinar, the webinar 2 of the 2-part series webinar. The webinar 1 focused on the policy aspects, and today we are here in the webinar 2, which is basically aimed at mainstreaming, water-sensitive approach through exemplar projects spanning different scales. And the purpose is that we strengthen the application of water-sensitive design principles, approaches, and techniques. And we would be discussing opportunities, barriers, and challenges at different scales in the existing urban areas and new developments. If you see, we have 2 hours of program whereby we spend an hour with the speakers making case study presentations, and we would also be followed with a panel discussion. However, I would like to say the School of Water and Waste in this journey of mainstreaming, good practices. This is our 14th webinar in the series, and thousands of people joined. And I think, Shivali, today also we have an interesting number of people registered. So if you can show us the geographical space, the next slide. We have basically a lot of people who have registered, around 562. The program is live streamed, and we have around 207 cities from where people will connect. And last webinar, you can go back to the previous slide, Shivali. The last webinar was the previous one. We had a last webinar where Rajiv Ranjan Mishraji, who is the Director General of National Mission Clean Ganga, he inaugurated the webinar. The recording of that webinar is available, and he emphasized that there is a need for engineering and planning to go together to make cities more water sensitive. The webinar recordings are available for people who missed out on this, and there is a link available here. So go ahead, Shivali. We had interesting panelists in the last webinar, and today also we have put together an interesting group of speakers and panelists. Malcolm is here from Center for Cooperative Research Center, Water Sensitive Cities, Australia. We have Shivali, my colleague, from CSE. We have Carolyn from Alluvium. We have Dan from Alluvium. And we have interesting panelists, Vijay Chaurasiaji from Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Manu Bhatnagar, seasoned expert on mainstreaming water-sensitive design and planning. I happen to work with him for 2 decades. I've known him. Hina Zia, who is from Academics, Central University, Head of the Architecture and Acoustics Department. Rajneesh Shareen, Program Director, Sustainable Building and Habitat at CSE. Next, please. So I would hand over this following session to my colleague and moderator, who is representing partner institution Alluvium, Harry Vairapswamy. He would be moderating the event along with us. And Harry, back to you.
Thank you, Suresh, and thank you everybody for joining us from many countries across the world to this webinar. Welcome and thank you for joining me. As Suresh mentioned, I am Harry Vairapswamy. I'm with an organization called Alluvium from Australia. And today we are very excited to bring you this second webinar as part of a 2-part webinar, which has been a collaboration of the 3 organizations here on your screen, Alluvium, the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities, both organizations from Australia, and the Center for Science and Environment in New Delhi. We've come together recently to form a knowledge partnership because we share a common value in urban water management. We want to see innovative urban water management in cities and towns globally. So we've recently come together in a knowledge partnership with the one purpose to facilitate the adoption of water-sensitive principles in India. Next slide, please. As Suresh mentioned, this is has been a two-part webinar series. We had a very good start last week in getting support and comments from the Director General for National Mission for Clean Ganga, which was fantastic. And if you haven't listened to the webinar and wasn't able to join us, please, I encourage you to listen into that recording. Today, we're very much focusing on case studies in India and Australia, where we'll go into more details to understand how water-sensitive principles are actually implemented on the ground and in institution. Next slide, please. So before we get to the case studies, I thought I'll just do a quick recap of the presentation last week, where we had two speakers from Australia talk about the journey that Melbourne has taken towards water-sensitive cities. And I've taken this summary slide to illustrate the journey of Melbourne over the last 20 to 40 years even in its transition towards a water-sensitive city. So as you can see, it very much started in the 80s, in the 1980s, where the community really wanted to see a change in the condition of the waterways, which then led to a study of Port Phillip Bay in the surroundings of Melbourne, where it became very apparent that there had to be improvement to point source and diffuse source of pollutions. And then that led to the stormwater, the Victoria Stormwater Action Program in '99, which really started to push for demonstration projects to look at how stormwater could be managed more sustainably and improve the quality of water entering the Port Phillip Bay. So Melbourne went through a time where it explored demonstration projects, which then led to an industry capacity building program. At the same time, a number of tools and guidelines came into the industry to guide the industry. So as you can see, it started out very much bottom-up approach. And at the same time, though, a number of policies, statewide policies and local government policies started coming in place to help in upscaling water-sensitive urban design and water-sensitive cities approach. This culminated in the 2017 Victoria Government Water Plan, which now outlines principles for how water should be managed and planned, and aligns very strongly with the principles for water-sensitive cities. So in summary, it's been very much a bottom-up approach to start with, but over time, policies and guidelines have come in place to help upscale water-sensitive urban design and the approach of water-sensitive cities in Melbourne. So next slide, please. And this is my final slide, and I'll just end here to say that the journey of Melbourne has, over the last 20 to 40 years, has been very much in those last three states, the transition states, moving from a waterway city to a water cycle city. And now we're very much entering into that water-sensitive city phase. A couple of things we've learned on the journey was that those three principles that are on your screen are very critical for a city that's looking to transition to a water-sensitive cities. And those three principles being, the first one being the cities operating as a water supply catchment, the second one being cities providing ecosystem services, and the third one cities comprising water-sensitive communities. And I hope through the case studies today, you will be able to see how those principles have been applied to the numerous case studies in Australia. And finally, I'll just end on those 5 points at the bottom of the screens, which have been lessons learned from Melbourne and Australia as well on the transition to water-sensitive city. And in that, champions in organizations, champions in organizations have made a big difference. Creating platform for connecting people was critical. Knowledge sharing between local government, state government has also been very important, as well as demonstration projects and guidance and applications as well. So that neatly summarized some of the key lessons learned in Melbourne's story and transition to water-sensitive city. So I'll leave it here, and I will now pass on to to Suresh and Shivali, who will talk you through and present on India's journey towards water-sensitive cities, as well as a number of case studies. Thank you very much for joining us today, and over to you, Suresh.
Thank you. Shivali, can you share the screen? Yeah. So very good morning once again, and thanks to Harry for setting the context. I would try to present today India's journey. If you look at India's journey on mainstreaming water-sensitive design and planning, it may not be that perfect as happened in Australia. However, it is not that imperfect also because we are historically also as a country where water has been an element of design and planning. Today, India has 8,000 urban centers and rapid increase in urban population and people are moving to cities and towns. And this is resulting in huge increase in the built-up area, which is increasingly, increasing the runoff from pre-development stage to post-development stage. And this is clearly posing several challenges to cities. Next, please. If you see today, Indian towns and cities face two problems. On one side, they face a problem of that India does not have even a single city, or there might be very small 1 or 2 cities where there's a 24/7 water supply. Otherwise, cities are struggling to meet the demand-supply gap. There is a huge groundwater exploitation, and the role of groundwater is underestimated and unaccounted in urban areas. However, it plays an important role. On the other side, increasing incidences of flooding. Increasingly, all the smart cities, Amrut cities, which are part of the urban reform agenda, are facing this as a big challenge, the drainage challenge, that whether it is good way to do mechanical pumping and, increasing the dia of the pipes. So there's a big challenge of coexistence of shortage of water supply and abundance of water. Next, please. Currently, CSC has analyzed through its last 2 decades of research that there is a unwritten rule and a conventional way how a city looks at water supply. When a village becomes a town and town becomes city, that you intend to plan for bringing water from faraway places. Distant transfer of water is the solution which is seen, and that involves a lot of storage, diversion, pumping, treating, and the distance keeps on increasing. You think that there is far away somewhere good quality water available in Himalayas or elsewhere or in other storages. For the sewage, it is the same way that you want to dispose of your waste outside the city somewhere, and it also involves huge amount of piping, pumping, diversion costs, and treating costs. So outside the city, out of sight, out of mind is the current way how water supply and water sanitation is being planned. So this is the conventional way how it is being thought, but we are talking about a paradigm change, and this is what is this webinar all about and my presentation all about. Next slide, Shivali. We have done a quick mapping. This slide was shown in the webinar 1 also of the smart cities. And same is the situation in Amrut cities and other urban centers. If you look at the smart cities, there are 100 smart cities under planning stages in India. And you look at the flooding incidences, 52 smart cities have reported increasing incidence of urban flooding. And if you look at the status of groundwater, there are a considerable number of smart cities also exploiting the groundwater, and rapid decline is happening. And they are entering into dark zones where they would be restricted in terms of availability of water, and they would make similar kind of conventional planning solutions saying that bring water from faraway places. So in situ resources are exploited and abused and misused, and there is no plan for recharge, and other provisions which are part of water-sensitive design elements. So I think the Indian smart cities and all the urban centers need to relook at how they plan. Next, please. Uh, this is the right time for me to say that, when India is planning its reform agenda, to look at historically, were we as a society and a civilization which were sensitive to water, or as something has gone wrong. So these few slides we have put together. Last 2 decades of research, CSC has documented the water sensitive in human settlement planning, and we are looking at the historical evolution and what is the future prospects in India. Shivali, can you go to the next slide? If you look at India had a historical understanding through, Arthashastra and Harappan cities, we all had designed our cities, and we had stormwater drains. And the ancient and medieval cities have exhibited nature-based development, keeping in mind the size and density of the cities. However, what has happened is that, when India became a colony and we had introduction of Victorian engineering, we had institutional arrangements which transferred the rights and powers of the community to select technical organization, and institutionalization of water management happens. However, historically, it was not the case. Historically, participated, decentralized water management was the key, and also people have played an important role. Communities were very important, and communities were in charge, and that you would see that today we see in the developed world, many places we are coming back to the same thing that, but however in India we think that we should move towards more centralized systems. In the developed world we see that, people are moving to a decentralized and community role in water management. There is a map at the bottom. If you see that, these are different agroclimatic regions in India where different rainfall pattern was there, and different stormwater harvesting, rainwater techniques were applied, and these were able to, meet the water requirements and to address the stormwater issues in India. So I think there was a rich tradition of hydraulic society which existed in hydraulic civilization. So we need to learn that what went wrong, and also see that whether there is a hybrid model possible. Next, please. So we have also mapped post-independence, some things that where things have happened, and whether there were some things which could be improved upon. We see that post-independence, the Victorian engineering, which left its footprints in Indian planning scenario, the links between the local and regional drainage was broken, and metropolis cities were growing rapidly in size and space. There was Ministry of Works, which is now CPHU, which was created. There were increasingly a lot of drainage master plans being created, which focused on networks and services design. And CSC back in 1992 came out with a research report called Floods, Floodplains, and Environmental Myths. And we also have tried to understand that how city planning was moving towards more regionalization. NCR Planning Board set up in 1985, which started to look for functional plan for drainage, that water needs to be understood through catchment, and water supply systems and drainage system need to consider the catchment approach, which was highlighted by Harry also in his presentation. And also, in person, got involved with one of our panelist friend who is there, Mr. Manu Bhatnagar, and we started documenting good practices in stormwater harvesting back in 1999, and we created a blueprint for water augmentation in Delhi, where we had concept of flood water and stormwater harvesting introduced in India in Delhi first time. And this is an extensive 600-page volume report which is there. And simultaneously in NCR Plan 2021, there was a functional plan for drainage where there was a provision for 2 to 5% of the municipal area or the planning area to be earmarked for area under water bodies. These were some preventive side interventions happening. However, on the project side, in the programs, the central federal government programs, JNU RRM was a project which was targeting 70 plus cities, which focused on service level benchmarks. In the benchmarks, there was little less sensitivity, and there was more focus on percentage of coverage of drains along the roads. And though it mentioned about incidences of water logging, but it was thought that more drainage would solve this problem, or expanding the dia of the pipe would solve the problem. There was unprecedented investment in at least those big cities, and there was funds available for hardware, but however software or the nature-based solutions were not mainstream ideas. However, they were next please. Yeah. So in this process where, some organizations like CSC and INTAC and some other organizations were pushing for a need for being water sensitive, and we were trying to say that India was a hydraulic society, there was one intervention which happened as a curative and a reactive step, was that Central Groundwater Board and Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs issued directions saying that a particular size buildings and plots should have rainwater harvesting at the building level. And this was instituted in 2001. And there is also a thing in 2006, there was as a reactive measures that, EIA notification for township and area development was there, which was pushing for that areas which do not have municipal water supply or which have shortage of water resources, they should develop some measures such that they could be water sensitive. On the other side, water was also seen as a threat to life and property, and NDMA issued management guidelines for urban flooding. There were guidelines for urban drainage. There was a national mission for sustainable habitat where I was involved with the CPHU, and there was a recommendation saying that 2 to 5% of the municipal area to be reserved for water bodies and flood mitigation. These were interesting things which in last decade or so have happened. There was a program called Amrut, which is a national flagship program, and Smart City Mission, which is currently in implementation. And along with that, Ministry has commissioned CSC for developing a practitioner's guide on water-sensitive design and planning. And it has also included in 2019 in the manual on stormwater and drainage by CPHU as a good practice. So these two things have happened, and Delhi, the national capital, has also prepared a drainage master plan. And CSC has supported Odisha state government come out first guidelines in the country on water sensitive design and planning. So water sensitive design and planning has started appearing in the government documents and dialogues. However, it is not a mainstream idea. So to make it a mainstream idea, there are certain things we are promoting, and we have been documenting case studies that there are real implementers, real beneficiaries of various good practices like water sensitive design and planning. So today's focus is on case studies. So we would be presenting few case studies in this webinar. Next, please. So these case studies would be discussed by my colleague Shivali, who would take you through this, who has worked extensively for last 7-8 years on various case studies, that how this works. Shivali, back to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Rohila, for setting the context. And I'll just take you through case studies. So here we are focusing on case studies at 3 different scales. That is at individual or at campus level, then neighborhood level, and as well as the city level. So within a city that we have worked over the years, we realized that when we work with officials and we try to go for water sensitive interventions, the problem lies that there is no land in metropolitans and urban areas and cities. The land is the problem. So if we look at different land use pattern of cities, if it is a planned part of the city, it will always have, you see the green area, which is always there, 17 to 20% of green area, and the second highest area that you see, it's orange, that is residential area. So within that residential area, again, you have net built up area, which is only 20 or to 17 to 20%. Rest all is open. So within a planned area, we still have a scope and potential within that open space, because 74 to 79% is open. And if we can contribute only 1 to 3% of that open space, we would have certain scope of implementing water sensitive approach. So this was a study that we did so that we could do hand holding and get into this approach. So with this, I'll showcase few of the case studies. All these case studies are documented in CSC website. If one wants to go through in detail, they can of course go in detail at CSC website. The first one is Noida. So this is a satellite city of Delhi. Here we worked with Noida Development Authority, and the main objective was to overcome the inadequacy in surface water as the Noida, and as well as to arrest the runoff. So Noida was struggling, is still struggling, from majorly the water supply from Noida is from groundwater. 80% of water supply is from groundwater. So over the years, the groundwater has been declining because the major supply is groundwater, and there was no provision of runoff to be arrested, in spite of the fact that it lies between these two rivers. So we propose certain site conditions according to different sectors, what all could be proposed as rainwater harvesting structure. And this poster, the sector map, was given to Noida Development Authority, and we realized the key finding of this research was that Noida had 27.3 million cubic meters of potential, and which will reduce the 26% of annual water demand of Noida itself. So without getting water from any distance Ganga scheme or any particular scheme, 26% of annual water demand could be solved by using full potential of rainwater harvesting. Second one is, this one is implemented by architect Anu Mridul in Rajasthan. So as we know, in Rajasthan there's Jodhpur, and there is Umaid Palace. So this is visited by tourists a lot. And within this range of Umaid Palace, there is Umaid Heritage, a high-end real estate project. The project was developed in such a way that the natural slope, the hilly slope, was considered, and the natural topography is not disturbed. So that's one point where the green infrastructure, water sampling approach was taken into consideration. Apart from that, so these green areas that you see, these are the blocks which takes away the water naturally and allows water to be percolated at the same time. One of the green area was proposed to be a temple or a monument, while architect Anu Mridul suggested that instead of monument, we can go for rainwater harvesting structure. So if you know that Rajasthan is famous for having architecturally step wells. The step well, however, used to be constructed in historically for extracting the groundwater. But here we are having step well to get all the runoff from the surrounding catchment area, which is around 110 acres of land, and get all the water stored into this step well. And this entire water is being used within the campus again, within this neighborhood again. So 20% of this neighborhood is lush green, and in Rajasthan it's not possible to afford that green area, but they are able to afford it by using water from the site itself. The runoff from that step well is accumulated for the entire year and is being used for horticulture purposes. Apart from that, this site is totally off-grid. It is not putting any load on municipal functionaries to take care of their runoff. Because of the monument, it's constructed in such a way, we always say that, it's a liability, we're making one more structure, but it's an aesthetically beautiful monument. If you look for the Umaid Heritage on Google, you will first find this property, which is Birkha Babri. We call it Birkha Babri, it's stepwell. It has increased the property value. It is also used for knowledge dissemination, and aesthetically it's pleasing and provide recreational activities. Then I would like to show, this is one of the model projects of CSE. So there's a colony in near central Delhi, which is Nizamuddin East, and it comes under Archaeological Survey of India because it's near all the monuments that you see in the central Delhi. And within this neighborhood, if you see, it's very planned neighborhood, right? And this is where the opportunity lies, because every neighborhood collects, every 2-3 houses collects all the storm water in a common chamber, and these common chambers then further connect to recharge structure. So they are like chambers. The drainage line is flowing as is, like in any of the planned residential sector, the drainage line is flowing, and within those drainage line there are intermediate chambers, and from there the water is being harvested. The total catchment is around 20 hectares of this entire neighborhood, and around 48.5 million liters per year is harvested here. Initially, it is being so the drive was by the people staying in the neighborhood, and architect Vandana Menon, who was also the resident of this neighborhood, tried to implement it with help of CSC, and it is quite successful because it has been implemented in year 2004, and it is successful till now. We can always go and visit this place if you stay in Delhi. There's one more recent campus. So this is IIT Jodhpur. So this is designed by architect Sanjay Prakash, his firm Shift, and they designed this campus to be a water-sensitive campus. If you see so this is in the highway, near the highway NH65, and if you see that the campus is designed, the master plan that they call the master plan is designed in a compact way, so that all these green and buffer areas which could naturally be included in the site, and it could support the green infrastructure activities at the site. So this was the natural drainage, for example, this was the natural existing drainage system of the site, and this was a proposed project, which was quite similar. All these natural conditions was taken into account, and apart from these these swales and bioretention, so all these water which flows through the site, which was already flowing, was taken into account, that the path was not disturbed, rather it was enhanced by allowing some infiltration within these structures. So just by the landscaping design, the providing swales and rain gardens and bioretention areas, the natural flow was actually enhanced. Apart from that, they have also constructed, they are reusing the wastewater, and this is the model project which they are doing with Center for Science and Environment, and that is also part of this campus. So this campus, they have tried to make entire water sensitive campus.
You have to go a little fast.
Yeah, so last two projects. So this is lately as we know, NGT order was given in 2015, wherein it was decided the drainage master plan was constructed for Delhi, and it was decided the northern part of Yamuna, from where the Yamuna enters, that part has the potential to infiltrate a lot of flood water. So tapping that as potential, not wasting and leaving it as a runoff. This project, first pilot project, was constructed in Palla village, and it encourages recharge of around 900 million liters, and it is also used for augmenting city water supply. So that's the scheme. So it's still in working state. The current status is that some of the structures have been implemented, and additional area of 35 to 40 hectares have to be covered. So this is the Yamuna, and this is that area, Palla village, the northern part of Yamuna. So I'll just quickly move because all these details you'll find. So this is one of the campus at Pusa. It's agricultural campus already. So here there are two colonies near to the institute. So although it seems that it's institutional level implementation, but here two colonies, the wastewater from two colonies have been taken into account, and it is being treated by totally entire natural system. Replacement of sewage treatment plant by using wetlands and through plants and pebbles, and system is being implemented and used. All that water is being used in the campus of Pusa, which is agricultural campus in India. Then we have Lodi Gardens. We all know that this garden again has a historical importance. In the horticulture of this garden, for irrigation purpose, the wastewater from the surrounding colonies, again taken into account. So it is being implemented Vision Earth, and the technology is soil biotechnology. Again, that's a natural, nature-based technology which is being used. And here we are trying to show that how, in a sensitive way, the water from the different colonies, the nala which is going near to the drain, which is going near to the park, is being arrested, and all that water is being maintained to reuse and maintained as being used to maintain the historically important public space. Then we have a campus, as Dr. Mula mentioned, that it is initiative of School of Water and Waste. We have a campus in Rajasthan. namely Alwar, near Alwar. So here we are trying to, it's a big campus. Here we are trying to do that. If you see these small interventions, that all the rainwater which falls over the road surface and surrounding areas get accumulated, and it's around 12,000 liters of water every day. It is accumulated from the rainwater, and apart from that, we have also wastewater systems. That all entire wastewater is being used for flushing purpose. So if you see the kitchen also use rainwater, the wastewater is reused. We have decentralized wastewater system, soil biotechnology. All these are natural systems implemented with throughout the site. So you can come and always visit. Apart from looking at the information, it's majorly highly used for dissemination purpose. Lastly, we have number of publications, as Dr. Rohila mentioned, and you can go through all these publications where we have showcased case studies also, and how and what, why, how and what to do. Lately, we have worked with Odisha government, where we have tried to showcase through research the roadmap for 4 cities, that is Behrampur, Rourkela, Cuttack and Bhubaneswar. And also, as well as in Delhi, we have showcased that if you use only 1 to 3% of existing neighborhood parks or existing parks, then you would be able to cater to millions of liters of water in an year. And that's only through the rainwater and using only 1 to 3% of existing green parks. So with this, I thank and end the presentation, and sorry for taking more time. Yeah.
Thank you, Shivali, and thank you, Suresh. Very good to see so many case studies, and we've got a couple of questions from the attendees. So one question on a question based on infrastructure improvement. So the question is, how can we achieve water-sensitive development if the focus of strategies is not on infrastructure improvement? And the second question is on what is done to minimize contamination of groundwater for the case study where you looked at recharging groundwater. So I'll put those 2 questions to Suresh and Shivali.
First question is a very good question, and but I would like to say that how do you define infrastructure? Infrastructure is not just that you have a pipeline and networks, but however, even open spaces act as an infrastructure, because if they are able to provide you services, so there is ecosystem services and value of that services. So green open spaces are green infrastructure actually, and blue open spaces which we create are infrastructure. So the infrastructure definition has to include these water elements which play an important infrastructural role. I would say that. And Harry, what was the second question?
Second question was, how do you ensure there's no contamination of groundwater in recharging solutions?
Okay. There are provisions of filter media as well as a multiple barrier approach to ensure that the contaminants are obstructed or stopped before it enters into the aquifer, into the sink. And this approach, if you read the practitioner guide, that explains this multiple barrier approach, that filters and screens the contaminants for getting into the groundwater or source of water supply, which is surface water. So this approach factors into this.
Excellent. Thank you, Suresh, for addressing those questions. And thank you again, both, for a fascinating presentation on the journey that India has taken so far and the case studies. Really good to see so many case studies now being implemented in India. So we can now turn our attention to the Australian case studies. So the next presenter is Dan O'Halloran. Dan is from Alluvium Consulting in Australia, and he has worked in the public and private sector for around 18 years, and he's worked in sewerage and water planning, waterways, livability, and stormwater management. Dan will speak about the importance of master plans and integrated water management plans and the outcomes that you get when you integrate water-sensitive principles into those plans. So he will talk about 2 case studies, and I will pass on over to Dan.
Thanks very much, Harry. I just need to be able to share my screen if you don't mind, Sukanya.
Screen sharing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, thanks for that introduction, Harry. I appreciate that. My theme today is to discuss from strategy to construction and how water-sensitive cities begin with strategies and master plans. And I'm going to look at 2 case studies, one being from the city of Melton, which is a large local government area in Melbourne that is installing passive street tree irrigation across its area. And a development called Stamford Park is a residential housing development that is using water in a fit-for-purpose way at a range of scales. So let's talk about the city of Melton first. This is a map of Melbourne, metropolitan Melbourne, and you can see Melton is on the western edge of greater metropolitan Melbourne. It covers 500 square kilometres, and it's characterised by having low rainfall of about 300 or so mil, 300 to 400 mil a year, and higher temperatures than the rest of Melbourne. It's currently experiencing rapid population growth and has been cleared of a lot of its vegetation, and there is currently low tree coverage, and the municipality or the government area is at high risk of the impacts of urban heat. And there's an opportunity over the next 20 years to plant an additional 130,000 new street trees. A recent study that was undertaken in 2018 ranked the municipalities of Melbourne to highlight their vulnerability to urban heat. And Melton was the 3rd most, or equal second, if you like, most vulnerable local government area in the whole of Melbourne. So there is a key driver there to reduce urban heat and an opportunity for new street trees, but how do we keep them healthy and lush and providing the shade that we need over the next, well, planting over the next 20 years, but for the next 100 years. So let's look at a typical street in Melton today. As you can see, there are some shrubs, a few trees, but overall there's not a great deal of street tree coverage in that particular street. So that's today, and what we're hoping for in the future is to have a number of trees in those streets, one tree for every house, to provide shade along those footpaths, along those roads, and also to provide biodiversity and habitat for biodiversity and birds across this local government area also. So how did this begin? So back in 2018, Alluvium worked with the city of Melton to develop the Integrated Water Management Plan, or you might call it a master plan. In that plan, we had 3 objectives: to reduce the town's reliance on potable water, so to use other sources, to have healthy waterways and wetlands, and to have valued landscapes that are connected and accessible. So we mean they're connected together, so there's habitat connectivity across the city, and also that the people of Melton can access those natural spaces. Underneath that, one of the key outcomes was to reduce the urban heat island effect across the city of Melton. And a key action to achieve that, or target, if you like, target 3.1, was to undertake a street tree passive irrigation trial and to build capacity within the city to implement that trial and to understand why we're doing it, to understand the budget associated with that, and to guide the local land development industry in implementing that. So that was a key outcome. And the local government decided that that was the first thing that they were going to tackle coming out of this plan. And because we developed the plan, all the key stakeholders, both within the government area and their agency stakeholders, water authorities, the state government, were aware of that objective and were broadly supportive of it. So this is what's been happening over Melton for the last couple of years and will be happening over the next 20. So passive irrigation means that we're taking the water that is running down the curb of these streets. You're probably familiar with this, but I'll walk you through it. Running down our streets into an inlet and into a cavity there. We fill that cavity with gravel. and also a slotted pipe that allows water to come in from the street and to fill up that gravel trench. And that provides moisture within the soil profile. And if you look at that last picture on the slide, the tree is planted there and can access that moisture in the soil, moisture that would otherwise not have been there. So how much does it cost? The developers are getting the cost of this down to about $500 to $1,000 per tree. Initial estimates were a lot more than that, but the ingenuity and innovation of the land development industry has meant that they've got very good at doing this, and have reduced the price or the cost accordingly. Across the city of Melton, it's expected this will reduce stormwater runoff by about 20%, improving the quality of water, reducing the amount of stormwater reaching the waterways in Melton, improving their condition. And over time, we're going to have greater canopy cover, cooler streets and healthier trees, which is of course, incredibly important as climate change enhances the impacts of heat across this area of Melbourne. So if we look at our water sensitive cities outcomes, we are supplying water on a street and precinct scale to these trees, water that would otherwise have been manually provided. But indeed, over time, these trees aren't manually watered, and there's a risk that they would die or not thrive. So the water that is provided is really more to ensure their survival and that they're healthy. It introduces this concept to the local community. Every house will have one of these outside of their residence. And so there is an interest about how this works and what it is. And so the community becomes a little bit more aware of the process and the objectives. And also the city is providing ecosystem services. So 130,000 trees across this area is going to provide or deliver a lush green landscape as to something that would otherwise be quite dry and quite harsh. That's my first case study. I'm going to talk now about a slightly different context, a smaller residential housing development called Stamford Park. The vision for this development, and if you can see my cursor there, it's this area here, these grey roofed locations or residences there. The vision is to achieve an integrated approach to catchment and water management for the estate, integrating all water sources in a fit for purpose and sustainable way. So the development covers about 15 acres with about 160 residential homes and an apartment block with 30 apartments. The land for this development was owned by the local government, who went into a partnership agreement with the developer. And as a result, the land was handed over with conditions about how water should be managed within the landscape. What we're going to talk about over the next 2 or 3 slides delivered 6,000 cubic metres a year reduction in potable water used within the houses, about 4,000 cubic metres a year of stormwater irrigating green spaces, and a reduction of about 40% of stormwater going to the receiving environments. And you can see here that there's an existing wetland, the Corin Warrable Creek, it's called, running across the sort of northwest of that picture. And so very close to this development are sensitive environmental receptors that we're looking to protect. Okay, so here's a few things that we needed to do in this development. We needed to retain the floodplain volume so these houses weren't flooded. We needed local rainwater harvesting reuse on every house. We wanted stormwater harvesting from the wetlands that were just off to the west, the treatment wetlands. We wanted to use that water to irrigate open spaces. We wanted to bring water to the surface so that people were aware of it and could see the water. And so we designed a local waterway to provide aesthetic, ecological, and tree irrigation benefits. And also we had some irrigation trenches across the development to infiltrate stormwater into the soil profile to support local vegetation. So the little picture on the bottom right-hand side there shows the local or constructed waterway. It's only a small thing, but it does receive stormwater from the wetlands and also from local roads, and it's connected to infiltration trenches underneath or in line with our trees, in between our trees, so that they are getting passively irrigated also to provide shade and canopy cover. So here's what it looks like today, or as of about last week. So if we look at A, precinct scale, that's our local waterway. The water comes from our wetland, is released at the top of the waterway where my cursor is, runs down to a local pool at the bottom end there. Obviously, the vegetation needs to be established, but that will bring water to the surface, particularly in dry times, and is a mechanism to irrigate those trees. On the street scale here under B, we have infiltration trenches. So these are installed in small triangular areas across the development. There'll be a park bench there, there'll be a tree, and that will be a lush green area for people to sit and relax. And if you look at C on the lot scale, there's our rainwater tank, very typical rainwater tank that's going to, providing water to our laundry and our toilets. So if we look at our water sensitive cities themes, we're providing water on the lot scale and also the precinct scale with our stormwater harvesting. The rainwater harvesting is about $1,000 a lot, and the stormwater harvesting scheme was relatively cheap because the source of water was quite near our demand. Providing ecosystem services by supporting the trees in the area, having a local waterway that again will provide some localised habitat and also floodplain protection there as well, and a nice integration between the development and the natural environment around it. And also the water sensitive communities where the people are introduced to these assets, and particularly the local waterways, so they can dangle their feet in that pond and understand and learn where that water is coming from. So some of the challenges: getting everyone together to agree on these things is a long process and requires a written document. We need to justify the cost, which has been absorbed in the house pricing. We need to stand firm when an approach is challenged. So there's always going to be compromises, but there are certain things that you don't want to compromise on. We should stand collectively behind those key things, and they will be written in our master plan. We need to look after our maintenance staff. We need to educate them, and we need to teach them about these new asset types and teach them how to blend the new and the old. We also need to integrate with below ground services. There's water, there's sewerage, gas, telecommunications, a lot of things underneath the road that we need to space appropriately. The key lessons: construction teams get the hang of things quickly and they learn how to reduce costs. So the cost that might happen at the start may not be the cost you end up with at the end, particularly if it's a long-term program. There's an economic benefit in Australia to selling cool and beautiful houses. People want houses with trees, with water. We need to educate our maintenance staff and support them financially in an ongoing basis. And often the driver for these initiatives is a sensitive downstream environment, and that can drive our change. And that's the end of my presentation. I think I've taken 1 or 2 minutes too long, but hopefully that has been of interest to you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dan. Great presentation, and we've been getting some interest on the Q&A panel on your presentation. So I've picked 2 questions, Dan, for you. First one relates to that very last point around the receiving environment. Yes. The question is, how important has that been in the project, I guess, as a driver for the project? The second question is there any data on reduction in local air temperature from the street tree planting?
I'll answer the first question. Having a sensitive environmental receptor is critical, and particularly in Melbourne. Just recently in 2018, Melbourne Water re-released their Healthy Waterways strategy that defines targets for stormwater harvesting and infiltration of stormwater, as well as a range of other objectives around flora and fauna. And that provides strong guidance for local governments and the development industry and water authorities and other people involved in the water cycle to address stormwater management in those sensitive environments. So here we had a wetland, we had a waterway, and we had a floodplain. There are a lot of things coming together that were demanding of us a very high standard of stormwater quality management. So yes, well, my personal view is that waterways, we build out from our waterways. We're trying to protect our waterways primarily, and then the benefits we get through the catchment really come back to that waterway. And we've all been locked down in Melbourne during the COVID pandemic, and really what we've seen is in Melbourne is people flocking to their urban waterways. So the condition and the health of those waterways has been a strong focus in Melbourne over the last 12 months. The second question I wish I could probably answer a little bit more accurately, and my colleague Stephanie Jacobs in Alluvium would be able to answer this question off the top of her head. She's a climate scientist who I work with. There is quantified data around the reduction in air temperature. I'm looking at Caroline. She might be able to help me. I can't give you a number off the top of my head, but I think it's in the sort of 2 to 5 degree. The surface temperature is very different to the air temperature, I think. So the air temperature is only moderate, but the ground temperature is quite significant. In one of the first graphs I had, it showed that in Melton, the difference between the road temperature where there are no trees and where there were trees was about 10 degrees. So if I take that study from 2018, I think that's a fair guess. But we'll have to get Stephanie onto that. Thank you, Caroline. I appreciate the encouragement.
Thanks, Dan. Good wise words to pass on the questions to a climate scientist. But very good to see your answer around the receiving waterways being a key driver for many projects. I think that's been many projects across Melbourne has been a key driver around.
From what I see from the Indian presentations, universal. So it's great to be sharing this this knowledge with you all. Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
I will now introduce our next presenter from Australia, Caroline Carvalho, also with Alluvium Consulting. Caroline has had experience in the private and the public sector as well for the last 30 years, and she's primarily worked in the drainage and waterways sector. So today she will talk about a case study of how she's worked at her times when she did work in the municipality, how she looked at disconnecting urban catchment to help restore the upper reaches of Dandenong Creek, and also talk about how she's taken the community and institutions along on that journey. Over to you, Caroline.
Thanks, Harry. Now, I hope everyone can see this screen easily. And interestingly, I'm now going to talk about a location where I've spent the last 8 years. So I've only joined Alluvium 5 months ago, and I'm with wonderful like-minded colleagues. So I think I've made the right decision. And the location I'm talking about is an area that Dan has actually played in at Stamford Park. And it's also 50 kilometres far east of Melton. So the contrast here we have is a 118 square kilometre municipality. All those red dots you see on the left-hand side of the map, they're all the flooding hotspots that we were dealing with. That goes back to the 1940s and 50s of urban growth and development. The right-hand side shows all the water-sensitive urban design infrastructure that we've been putting in place in the last 10 years in that city. And our main focus that our team had is how do we create stormwater systems that actually have multiple benefits, multiple outcomes when we've got so little land space, and we've got to make the most of every little footprint that we can find to put this sort of infrastructure in. So we were looking at ways to create integrated water systems that locally connect people to places where water meets. So our little team, our little Knox Stormwater team, that was our vision, that was our team motto, I suppose. So this is about returning all the lost wet spaces that we have lost from the city, putting them back where they belong when we've got 6 major waterway catchments converging within the one small municipal area. So historically, we hard engineered most of what we had to deal with in terms of stormwater management. The idea back then was in the 1970s of the trunk drainage. We needed to capture and convey and move that stormwater runoff away from private properties and people as fast as possible. Get rid of it quickly. We straightened waterways, we concrete lined waterways, and we piped waterways underground, never to be seen again, apparently, until 50 years on, and we've made a difference. So our journey has probably been quite rapid in the last 20, 25 years. So 22 years ago, I was involved with a team of 8 of us who created the concept of water-sensitive urban design back in Melbourne Water. And we took the Melbourne and Victoria, and then it got national. And it's so awesome to hear that India is using the same terminology. So our journey over the last 20, 25 years is really looking at soft engineering, multifunctional infrastructure, not single use, adding more of a focus around a holistic management of water in the landscape, keeping it in the landscape and making use of it in the best possible way. We've added waterways, improvement areas, wetlands. We've looked at vegetation along waterways and canopy cover for heat reduction, human health. We're looking at ways of connecting people to these natural elements that we may have constructed and done ourselves, but we're trying to mimic Mother Nature, so to speak, and make connections between people in these urban centres. Our drivers of change in the 70s, as I said, was risk and property and people damage. So all focused on flood. By the 90s, we started talking about soft engineering, green engineering. We started talking about an environmental damage that we'd done for 200 years in Melbourne. And by the 2000s, we started talking about the human health benefits of natural elements within our cities. And in the last 5-6 years, we've been talking about livability outcomes. All of this transitions all of our cityscapes towards that water-sensitive city state, which is where we're pretty much all aiming for. So as you can see, this is the nature of what we were dealing with in the city of Knox. Commonplace. They say a 1 in 100 year event should happen. Most people think happens once in 100 years. No. We have had 7 in the last 16 years in this city alone. And that's the nature of our roads and depths in the local suburbs. Environment, an impact on waterway health and pollution spills, illegal discharges that were happening, made international news. This is only in the last 2 years this was happening on a regular basis in Dandenong Creek. And people, drought, flood, but then we've got heat stress, bushfires, property and people losses. In 2009, you may have heard that was the last major year of our millennium drought that lasted for 13 years. In 2009, we had Black Saturday, but 2 weeks prior to Black Saturday, we had 374 Victorians pass away through heat stress. In the centre image there, you can see a project site that we actually did a few years ago. On the left-hand side, you can see how brown the sports field and the community park is. Sports field down here, the community park there. That's what it looked like just before the drought broke. And this is what it looks like today after we put integrated water management system in, using stormwater completely. So our IWM approach is looking, and this is across the sector, across the industry, how do we create adaptive, multifunctional assets with one small land footprint? Land is at a premium, we know that. How do we create water security and resilience in our urban centres, and how do we build that long-term and livability outcomes by using blue-green infrastructure? I won't go into the detail at the bottom of the slide. You'll get these slides and you can read it in more detail when you've got time. So all our systems can be scalable. They can be of all sorts of different cost or project value. The cheapest one we ever did in terms of wetlands within the city of Knox was $55,000, and that was using the dry creek bed, a disused dry creek bed, so it's very little excavation. And then we've got ones that go up to $1.6 million, and you can see they can be shaped in any way to suit the landscape and to achieve multiple and different types of function. Each of these systems occur in all sorts of land use, industrial, commercial, retail and residential mixes. So in the 70s, we used to just dig a hole in the ground and grass it, and that was our flood retarding basin. That was our protection system for flood management. We basically redid that whole wetlands, retarding basin, expanded it. We put a wetland floor into it, and we started integrating elements of community interaction with the space. So it's still a functional flood mitigation system. It is now a water quality treatment system to protect the downstream waterway. And we improved its flood storage to the point where we had a 20% risk of flooding right down to 3%. So functionally, it still works for stormwater. But what we did is we created landscapes, not infrastructure. And that's probably the main message that I can give here, is that we can engineer and design anything that we like, but if we actually start thinking about how to create a landscape with that infrastructure, we're going to get far more benefit for the community and longevity in the asset over time. So this is the nature of the retarding basin and wetland now. You can see it in the bottom right-hand corner. I've put some dollars and cents in there so you can get a bit of an appreciation of what this all means, and you can have a look at it later. On the left-hand top side, you can see 6 months after construction how lush that wetland system looks. And a lovely gentleman was kind enough, who was going to walk his dog with his wheelchair, to demonstrate how we designed it for all access and abilities, which is a requirement in Victoria. We use all sorts of modelling tools. We look at digital elevation modelling so we can find out where did waterways run historically, where were the low points in the landscape, where can we best put wetlands and billabongs today, given that we've straightened most of these waterways. We look at raw models to understand our catchments, what sort of supply are we going to get off in terms of runoff volumes, what size do we have to create these systems to be. We use music modelling, which is a water quality modelling tool, also developed here in Melbourne, and about 20 years ago we started it. We also look at how we can progressively disconnect urban areas by intercepting with a wetland system, intercepting with a wetland system to disconnect that residential area from the local waterway. Whenever solving for anything in terms of water management, the best advice I can give is don't look at the problem up close and personal. Take a massive step backwards and have a look at the catchment. The opportunities and solutions are probably far more valuable if you look at a catchment scale or a sub-catchment scale than if you look at the site and the location and problem. So you can see in this particular project, it was our first integrated water harvesting scheme. We had 2 sites that we ended up saving in the end, the Oval and a very high visited parkland. We took flood flow from the residential streets and passed it through the parklands. We created an integrated system with a large storage tank, a lake storage and wetland storage for habitat breeding and treatment. And this system is now 98% reliability, fully serviced by stormwater. The only thing that kept us from having 100% was more storage space. So we were very pro wetlands in the city of Knox. We have a very green, leafy image in the city of Knox. The community expected it. The eastern side of the municipality is bounded by the Dandenong Ranges, a forested, treed area, very steep gradients coming into our municipalities. We had a lot of runoff at high velocities. But these wetlands are all taken, these photos, 6 months after construction fencing came down. So you can see how quickly they actually stabilise, and the level of maintenance is negligible based on the feedback from the maintenance crews. Again, more. Every single one of these looks like they're somewhere in the natural environment, way out of a city. What you can't see is completely surrounding every one of these locations is dense urban housing or industrial commercial precincts. Daylighting Dandenong Creek was a project we did with Melbourne Water, and this is where we took a waterway, the Dandenong Creek, which was piped underground for 50 years, and we brought it back to the surface. So it was a grass floodway channel originally with a massive pipe underneath, and slowly and progressively brought it back to the surface and got to the stage of tree planting. And the visitation and enjoyment of the community is significant. Every single one of our projects, we celebrate with the community. We have launch days, we have tree planting, talks and walks and tours, nighttime tours, and we do welcome ceremonies, and we encourage people to come along and hear about what the infrastructure is designed to do and why we do it. Engaging the community with signage, launch days as well, updates, project updates, bulletins, keeping them informed of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how they can participate is critical to building that champion momentum in the community as well, not just yourselves. So the lessons learned, look at the catchment, not the problem. Design solutions to suit the landscape, don't over-engineer. Design the system to blend with the form of the landscape. It keeps costs down. Think multifunctional outcomes when land is limited. Think beyond just floodwater engineering. Think about environment, people, aesthetics, long-term maintenance and running costs. Integrate infrastructure components to serve more than one purpose. Keep the community engaged. Invite community reflections and stories, and there will be some slides that I won't show you. You can look later of letters and social media posts that we received from the community acknowledging the work that we were doing. And ultimately, when you have champions, support them, look after them, back them up, do not let them burn out, and join them and make the point of difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Carolyn. Great to see your work over so many years working with communities and the municipality to make all of this happen, and also your point around it is around infrastructure. It is about landscapes rather than engineered solutions. So the same questions that I had for Dan, but this time for you, is around how much was the driver around protecting the river behind this this great effort?
Interestingly, in the city of Knox, we had a number of what were called high-value waterways. So they have significant ecological and stream value that have been identified by Melbourne Water. The waterway of Contamination Creek that Dan talked about in terms of the Stamford development, that's a high-value waterway. So the requirements of the residential precinct and development in that space was pretty strict in terms of water runoff volumes because of the waterway health and value. Dandenong Creek is a low-value waterway, has been from the start of my career 30 years ago, and never ever expected within my career path and my lifespan that we would be massively investing in the health of that creek, given how degraded it has been since the 1950s and 60s. So it just demonstrates how much you can turn things around from a poor quality waterway to something really treasured and valued and significant, and turn the whole landscape around on itself. It does take time to fix the damage we've done, but it's worth the start and the effort.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thanks again for taking us through this journey of yours. So I'll introduce our final presenter from Australia, Malcolm Eads from the Cooperative Research Centre for Water Sensitive Cities. Malcolm will change the scene slightly and will focus on lot-scale technologies, interventions, but we'll then also go back up to the city scale to look at what are the water security initiatives that can be taken to achieve water-sensitive cities principles. Malcolm has been a consultant for many years and provides advisory and design services on water-sensitive urban design and integrated water management. Over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much, Harry, and I think I'll just share my screen. Okay, well, look, I'd firstly just like to thank all the participants to the webinar. I hope you're enjoying what you're hearing, and I've certainly enjoyed the presentations that have come before mine. And I particularly want to thank Suresh and Shivali for presenting those great case studies from across India. And I can see so many kind of parallels with the thinking and the design work that's been happening here in Australia. So it's really great to see that water-sensitive urban design and water-sensitive cities thinking is already up and running in India. So that was fantastic. I will just move to my next slide. Before I get into my case studies, I'm the commercial manager at the Cooperative Research Centre for Water-Sensitive Cities, which I know for those of you that were at last week's webinar, Chris Chesterfield presented the story of the Melbourne transition to water-sensitive cities, and also the really critical role that research and research institutions have played in that role. And the CRC for water-sensitive cities is about to complete a 9-year cycle of funded research, and we're very excited to be bringing to the general public the benefit of all of that research. And what I've just got on the first slide here, so that after this webinar, you can go to the web link that I've put a red circle around there, and hopefully, Tarika, you can put that on the chat. If you go to that web link, you'll be able to access an enormous range of case studies and various bits of information which go well beyond what I have time to present to you today. So just so you're aware, there's a lot of information out there, and I encourage you to access it. So as Harry said, I'm going to focus on a couple of scales to just supplement what you've heard from the other speakers. And I first want to start with a lot scale example of what's happening really at the innovative end of residential housing in Australia. The case study I'm going to present is what's known as the Innovation House at a development in Melbourne known as Aquarivo. This is a development that the CRC's had a lot of involvement with the developer and the local water utility. And whilst I won't present to you the whole context of the whole development, I wanted to just highlight some of the innovation that's happening in terms of the water cycle and multiple outcomes that are being achieved right down at the individual residence and dwelling scale. And this is a real fusion of green, blue-green infrastructure, grey infrastructure and smart digital systems. So the context here is every household within this development at the Aquarivo development will have a rainwater tank installed, and importantly that rainwater will be connected up to not just the outdoor uses for irrigation and so on, but a greater number of internal uses within those dwellings, including to the hot water system, which is not normal or usual in the application of rainwater harvesting systems in Australia. But what that does is it makes available to that rainwater harvesting system a much greater number of end users or demands that increase the efficiency and the effectiveness of the investment in that rainwater tank, and also increases the amount of water conserved in terms of the draw on the local drinking water system of the town. But importantly, also in this development, the rainwater tanks don't just harvest water for the water use purposes. They're also able to be purged or the water released from those tanks when heavy rainfall is detected on the radar of the Bureau of Meteorology in Melbourne. So those rainwater tanks flip very quickly using smart technology from having their primary function being water conservation or water supply to being primarily used to reduce the volume of stormwater runoff and local flooding and creek flooding and erosion downstream. So that's a particular innovation in this development, which uses smart systems, which is the third bullet point on my slide there, which have been developed by the local water utilities. So this is a real example of water utilities leading and leading with innovation and using smart systems, smart monitoring, smart technology in the new digital world. These households also capture their wastewater and have it treated entirely within the development itself. So there's no connection outside of the development. And the wastewater that's collected is treated through natural systems and returned to each household to be used internally in uses like toilet flushing, but also to supply irrigation water to sustain the landscapes for not only the residences, but the public landscapes in the development. So here's a diagram of what that looks like. I'll let you explore this in detail a little bit later for the sake of saving some time. But importantly here, every part of the water cycle within the house and outside the house is carefully considered, and the infrastructure systems that have been developed for this development ensure that it's a closed loop system. So the water resources that are generated from within this development are used to the maximum. That includes some smart sewer technology known as pressure sewer. The value of pressure sewer is it enables the sewer network to use smaller diameter pipes, be shallower in the ground, so less costly to install, and importantly, they're fully sealed, so less infiltration into that sewer network of groundwater and other water systems. So that makes the process of treating the wastewater more effective and efficient, and reduces potential wet weather flows or overflows into the local environment. And this smart technology is really innovative in that it's controlling all parts of the water cycle and the infrastructure, and indeed some of the energy systems associated with the houses in this development. And that ability to switch the function based on priority need, whether it's flooding and flood mitigation or water conservation, is an absolute innovation. And really importantly, the data that's collected and that information is provided back to the residents and the consumers within this development so that they have real visibility and awareness as to how much water they're using, how much water is being generated within their house and within their development, and to moderate and adjust their behaviour accordingly so that they're becoming water sensitive citizens. So the outcome of building houses like this, and granted there's a lot of new technology in here, and it's right at the innovative end of housing in Australia, and let's not be under any illusions that this is the normal for housing in Australia, but it's a snapshot of where things are heading. So what happens at this development with all the houses equipped in this particular way is there is no wastewater generated outside the boundary or discharged to outside the boundary of this development. That has a number of benefits in terms of downstream treatment costs, costs of trunk sewer infrastructure outside the boundary of this development, and potential releases of wastewater to the natural environment. 70% of the drinking water that would typically be used by a residential house in a typical suburb like this in Melbourne, 70% of that quantity of drinking water demand is reduced through the use of the rainwater harvesting, but also the recycling of the wastewater through a dual reticulation network, or a purple pipe system as we call them here in Australia. And 25% of the peak stormwater runoffs, the peak that creates the local flooding problems and exceeds the conveyance capacity of downstream waterways, is reduced through this ability to engage the rainwater tanks as a storage mechanism to remove volume of runoff during heavy rainfall events. And engage residents through knowledge and data and being able to sort of have a real personal experience with the infrastructure that is supplying services to their homes. And the CRC has some PhD students that are currently monitoring the performance of houses at the Aquarivo development with the objective of building a really solid evidence base through monitoring and measurements as to the modelling that was done to come up with these water cycle benefits that you can see on this slide. Just in terms of costs and benefits, I'll run through these quickly. The rainwater tanks and the smart controls on each development or each residence, both providing that water supply and flood reduction benefit, reduces the size and cost of the stormwater infrastructure. That's the pipes and pits required through the development. And in doing so, therefore, reduce the overall cost of traditionally servicing a development like this with traditional urban stormwater infrastructure. As I mentioned earlier, the pressure sewers reduce diameter and depth. That's a cost saving, and also reduce infiltration into the sewer. The development's overall reduction on its demand on the town drinking water supplies has the effect of avoiding or delaying future capital investments that are required by the local water utility to increase the capacity of the town drinking water system to meet population growth. So these are real tangible cost savings that need to be understood and factored into a cost-benefit assessment. And by using locally generated water sources, which is rainwater, stormwater and treated wastewater, to irrigate and sustain the urban landscapes, both private and public, helps reduce human health impacts. And we've heard urban heat is a big issue in many parts of the world, and water plays a very critical role along with landscapes to mitigate the human health impacts of urban heat. But it also importantly improves the overall landscape amenity of the local urban environment, which is sense of place, pride and livability are the outcomes there. And importantly, there's a reduction in the overall discharge of nutrients and other environmental pollutants from this kind of development with this kind of smart technology, which protects the values of those waterways, which Carolyn mentioned is so important to Melburnians, and averts high levels of degradation and high subsequent rehabilitation costs. So they're the costs and benefits. I haven't given you dollar numbers. I think what I've given you here is the narrative or the description around how to understand costs and benefits. Sorry, the next scale I just want to present, and I might move quickly here for the sake of time, is a case study not dissimilar to what's been presented earlier by Dan and indeed by Shivali. I can see some parallels here with the water sensitive campus project that Shivali presented. Why I selected this one today is this is a project that was actually delivered in Sydney, Australia, nearly 20 years ago. It was very much one of the iconic early projects that demonstrated a very pure version of water-sensitive urban design. It's a brownfield infill development in Sydney, not far from Sydney's major airport in Mascot. And it's surrounded by a lot of existing urban and industrial infrastructure. And so there was old and ageing infrastructure downstream of this development area that was vulnerable to increased urban runoff and increased pollutant runoff from the redevelopment of this site. And what I noticed in Shivali's presentation was this early understanding of how the blue lines and the green lines play out when you look at a development area, be it greenfield or brownfield, and how important it is to understand these green and blue flows and have them understood and incorporated from the start into the master planning and design, or urban design of a place. This is where collaboration is absolutely essential to achieve successful outcomes in water-sensitive urban design and water-sensitive cities. So I know we'll have plenty of planners and architects and urban designers who are listening in, and I really encourage you to be a strong advocate and participant in water-sensitive cities projects. So with the benefit of understanding context and place and the flow of water and the importance of green space and green lines, a master plan can be developed that creates the necessary spaces and places for good water-sensitive urban design to then occur. And in this particular project, there's a whole range of really innovative applications of green infrastructure, water-sensitive urban design infrastructure. And I'm reminding you, this was done 20 years ago. And you can see through the images on the screen that these are really collaboratively considered and resolved solutions. So every element has a high degree of consideration from a landscape architecture, urban design, and engineering perspective. So many of the streets are equipped with biofilters that run down the centre median of streets that ensure stormwater runoff from roads has its first point of access onto the landscape rather than into a piece of grey infrastructure. Those green landscapes, biofilters, do the lion's share of the purifying of that water, the recharging of soil moisture, and maintain the health and vibrancy of those important landscapes, including the shade trees, as Dan mentioned earlier. In this development, I mentioned that there's downstream urban areas with ageing infrastructure, so it was really important to manage flood and flood waters. And so in this context, you can see there's a large central park area, and it's been really countersunk or depressed down into the landscape to function as a flood detention storage basin. But not every time it rains. Lower flows that can be handled by that downstream infrastructure pass under this and don't encroach on the amenity and usability of those green spaces. But when it's very, very heavy rain, this central park area, which you can see on the image on the top right, will charge up with water and then slowly release to those downstream stormwater assets, therefore avoiding a whole lot of costly upgrades to downstream infrastructure. And a really nice aspect of this project was public artists were engaged also to imagine how water can be expressed more creatively in the urban environment. And that image on the right, third down from the top, is what's known as the water stairs. And indeed, it is harvested stormwater through those biofilters that are in the streets that is collected in tanks under that central park, which also functions as a detention basin, which is then used to actually flow down over the top of these stairs as both an architectural feature, but something that children and local residents can engage in and get enjoyment from. So you can see in this project there's a lot of collaborative thinking and there's a lot of expression of water at different scales, and there's multiple functions occurring in every piece of infrastructure, which reflects Carolyn's very important points made earlier. And here's some images to show how aesthetically pleasing these green assets become when they're well considered in urban design. And these become real value adds to property prices and people's sense of place and the livability value of their local areas. I'll skip the outcomes because I think I've spoken to most of those and go to the cost and benefits. So Use of biofilters along more than 60% of the internal streets in this development has significantly reduced the requirement for use of grey stormwater assets like pipes and pits. And by doing so, there's a significant overall infrastructure cost reduction to provide drainage services to the development. Integrating flood storage detention requirements with the central open space design to reduce peak flows on the existing drainage assets downstream creates a significant avoided expense of having to upgrade ageing infrastructure downstream of a major renewal development such as this one. Integrating stormwater management functions such as biofilters, wetlands and flood detention with landscape functions. So as Carolyn mentioned earlier, it's not creating infrastructure, it's creating landscapes that function to provide infrastructure services is what we're really talking about. But by doing that in an integrated way, we reduce the overall land take needed to deliver stormwater management functions and urban amenity and recreational functions. And we are able to capture a lot of the cost synergies in bringing those disciplines together. There is generally low ongoing asset management costs associated with green infrastructure. And I think Carolyn and Dan have both mentioned there can be some initial higher costs to get green infrastructure established. But once it's established, if it's maintained through good access to water, which the design allows, and just through standard landscape management, which most municipalities or local communities are able to take on, they are very low cost, resilient and durable assets. And because of that, they actually represent a lower life cycle cost than most grey assets, which depreciate over time and actually have some very expensive renewal costs when they need to be reinstated. And I mentioned the development is now 18 years old, and all of those green assets that you saw in the earlier slide are still operating perfectly and in a strong, healthy condition. And so my next slide, which I just went into Google Earth today and grabbed these images. So these would be images of this development within the last 12 months. You can see in all of those images how successfully these landscapes are functioning, both in terms of their water management functions and their urban amenity and livability functions 20 years on. So very healthy landscapes. You can see how these are creating cool environments that are comfortable and accessible for residents, and they're aesthetically pleasing because they've been given high attention from designers, landscape designers, architects and urban designers. So finally, and very quickly, I just wanted to present a city-scale water security strategy.
1 minute, please.
All right, I might even flip through this then and let people review this when they get the slides after today's presentation.
Thank you.
This was a city-scale stormwater harvesting strategy that supplies this city, which is a regional city in Australia known as Orange, an unusual name, but it supplements and supports their drinking water system. In fact, last year in significant drought in this part of Australia, this was one of the only regional cities in this part of Australia that was able to sustain a drinking water supply to its local residents without significant restrictions. So I'm beaten for time, but I thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope you got a lot out of that presentation. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Malcolm. Sorry to rush you at the end. Fascinating presentation, drawing a lot of parallels between India and Australia, which was fantastic. I think, Malcolm, in the interest of time, we might move to the panel discussions. There's been a number of questions, but I think it's best to get them covered through the panel discussion, if that's okay.
That's fine, Harry.
Thank you, Malcolm. Suresh, I'll pass over to you for the panel discussion.
Thank you, Harry. Very interesting presentations, and I see that, sometimes in India, when we have seen that some of these solutions are looked upon as inferior and solutions, or maybe something which won't work. But however, both sides, it was clear that there are real implementers, real beneficiaries. And I would like to take this opportunity to, listen from the expert panelists who we have on board today. And I would request all the panelists to unmute themselves and also switch on the video as we go on to the two questions we have for the panelists today. We have around 20 minutes in hand, 5 minutes each. And I would like to pose my first question to all the panelists, and with their respective experience and the respective arena in which they are responsible for, I would like to hear from them that how are the approaches and the case studies today presented relevant to the Indian context, and how could they be adapted, and do they see any challenges and opportunities? So I think that I would say, and so you would get a chance to answer the second question, that if there are any short-term and long-term opportunities. But I would like to reflect upon, if all of you can take 2-3 minutes to reflect upon how do you think that these approaches are relevant in India. So can I request Chaurasya ji, if he's around? Mr. Chaurasya, Vijay Chaurasya is the CPHU advisor, and he sets the agenda for the country, that how the future drainage planning has to be done in India.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Saab. These presentations are really very, very interesting, and in fact, I am fortunate that I got this opportunity to learn, because we are actually searching for such type of studies which from small pockets scaled up to whole city basis, like we could see in Orange City and similar other examples also presented by Australian presenters. So it is really very, very interesting, and our interest further increases due to fact that in India, most of the urban local bodies are having low financial base. So, but in spite of that, the approach they are following is linear based approach. What Dr. Suresh also mentioned, that water is coming from far off places. After treatment, it is being distributed, and again, whatever wastewater is coming, that is going taken away to far away places out of city and then treated. And similarly, storm water also, whatever storm water is falling in the city, that is conveyed through long pipes and drainage system to out of city. So all these things involves huge cost, and as I mentioned, ULBs are having poor in financial base, so we are not able to properly manage the desired level of service that is required for these ULBs and their citizens. If I mention a little bit statistics, in case of drinking water coverage in urban area, safely managed through municipal services is only 56%, though excess is 96%. But 56% is, we can imagine that safely managed drinking water services is as low as 56%. Similarly, the wastewater treatment, it is hovering around 33-35%, something like that. And safe sanitation, if we see including on-site, off-site, that is also less than 70%. Storm water drainage systems, they are even less than 20% coverage along the roads and other things. So in given this situation, the onus is on us to find out the solutions which are cost effective, low in capex and low in opex, so that our ULB can afford. And over to that, or on top of it, the challenge that has been posed to us by our government is that they are targeting to provide 100% population with tap water connection in next 5 years. So through conventional means it is not possible, and here this water sensitive urban design concept becomes of immense use. Through presentation, I could see that what Australia was doing 20 years back in small pockets and now is scaled to whole city. I think in India somewhere in small pockets these things are being already practiced, but the need is to scale up to whole city basis. And for that, I think this is time that apart from the national manual on stormwater drainage that we have prepared and CSC has also contributed, there is a time to develop a national advisory giving the roadmap and step by step guidance to our ULB along with a good case study which give them confidence. I think already CSC has prepared, but taking that into account and through one expert committee, mainstreaming these advisories so that our ULB adapt in national missions and programs, I think that will go a long way. And other
we'll come back to you also
Okay.
if you can. Second question, but I would like to say that yes, we would certainly look forward and we can assist the ministry on this. We are also going to, in 2 weeks' time, launch a web compendium of such case studies from India and abroad. So I will be in touch with you. So can I take this opportunity to move to, and I'll come back to you again because it's a panel discussion. So I will have second question to you. I will request Manu Bhatnagar-ji, who has been, I've worked with him, we have worked together, and we were the first ones to initiate in 1995-96 the idea of stormwater harvesting in India, and also linking up that historically Indian cities were water sensitive, and to listen to him that how does he see these case studies from Australia, and what are the challenges and opportunities in India. Manuji, can you share with us your experience for 2-3 minutes?
Yeah, thank you, Suresh. I must also thank all the panelists for giving us such a rich presentation of ideas, and which inspire a lot of optimism and confidence. Coming to the applicability in India, I must say that, you see, policy is more necessary than the technicalities. We all understand the technicalities to a great extent. Several pilots have already been carried out in scattered areas, and Shivali showed some of them, and we also have done some of them. But you see, policy happens when there's a problem, there's a solution, and that must then be in a crisis situation. And Australia went through that 13-year drought. That was the crisis which has propelled all these initiatives on the ground. India so far seems to ignore the evolving or emerging crisis. We are beginning to respond, but certainly not in the manner which Australians have been forced to respond because of the drought. Now, I was very, impressed with that street tree irrigation in Melton. And as you know, in Delhi, we have got this master plan for drainage, which is basically addressing the urban flooding situation, which has lately arisen, because our rainfall patterns have begun to change. In the last decade, we are seeing extreme events happening. The same amount of rainfall which was spread over several days now comes in a few hours, and at the same time the imperviousness of surfaces has increased. So, seeing these simple structures along the roadside, which of course were for tree irrigation, but they can be for mitigating not only that urban flooding. And urban flooding, I see, is actually, it is the converse of water harvesting. That water is a resource not meant to be drained away, but to be captured at site. So, these simple things which we need to apply not only at the level of campuses, but they need to be upscaled up to larger scales, city scales, which we saw in Australia. From Caroline, I captured this interesting phrase of stepping back, seeing a campus, but in a larger perspective. Yes, the landscape is important, the topography is important, and our planners and planners not only at the city scale, but at the scale of campuses must understand that they have to work with the topography and not to use the available resources and technologies which are available to us to distort nature. Because it is not just those surface patterns in the topography which are important in the handling of the water resources, but those patterns have actually created underground situations also. And if we alter the surface patterns, then we are affecting the underground patterns as well. The importance of understanding the strata, the percolation, in more quantified terms, I think that is also very important because ultimately the surface water must be converted into groundwater. The surface water, we do not have that much space to store such large volumes which come down in the course of a day. And even groundwater recharge takes its own time. But groundwater is immune to evaporation losses. It is also available to us in a decentralized manner. So these, of course, what is happening in Australia in theoretical terms, we also know most of those things. But it is in the application, in the widespread application, we are still, quite behind. Uh, uh,
Anything to do with
Malcolm,
historical, Manoj?
well,
Manoj, the historical aspect, would you like to?
yeah, I would say, see, what is happening is that historically we have, focused upon the supply side, right? Any problems? Okay, we'll tap another river, create another dam. But demand management is also very important, and the two things must be brought together. But going back further, you see, our people always understood that the 3 months of the monsoon, that water resource has to be stretched around the year. So we always had means, various traditional means of storing the monsoon water so that it was available to us for 12 months. Now, here I would like to show a combination because pilots influence policy. Our bureaucrats always demand precedence. So we did the Horsecast Lake here in Delhi. It was a 1298 AD construct, and the catchment characteristics had changed. The modern town planning required that water should be drained away and not collected in local pockets. And so the Hors, that it's a 15-acre old reservoir in the heart of the city, and this reservoir could now only be filled with some amount of rainwater and on a regular basis with treated sewage water, treated wastewater, you can call it. And now the important thing here to note is that while we always talk about recycling water, the acceptability of recycling water at the household level is very low. There's a lot, a stigma attached to it. Even Singapore's new water is not all that readily acceptable, even though it meets the best world standards for drinking water. But here, once the wastewater recharges through the bed of the lake, it now assumes the form of groundwater. And the stigma, it changes, the mental perception changes. So this is something which can be applied on a large scale, and we are doing some fairly large projects on these lines by using the wastewater, recharging it in the aquifer, and the very process of recharging, it creates that soil filtration, which cleans the water still further. And in the Hause, I can say that the groundwater which we pick up is almost drinking water class. So
Anuji, I'll
historically,
come back to you. I'll go to the other panelists to see that, how much is the academics and research in universities who are dealing with human settlement planning? What learnings do they have with these approaches and case studies? Hina, can you reflect upon your experience of today's presentation?
Sure. Prior to coming as a pure academician, I would just like to highlight commonalities between Australia and India. We have traditionally been a very, very hydraulic society, and not all traditional knowledge is yet lost, as was highlighted in Sureshji's presentation. And so we have been, it was done by the people, for the people, bottom-up approach, a lot of case studies and successful projects. Even I had worked in my earlier role as a consultant, be it IIT Hyderabad, IIT Jodhpur, Nalanda University, Infosys campuses, iCert, plethora of specially educational and large institutional neighborhood scale projects where very cost sensitive approaches, successful examples we have been seeing. But what I see as a huge challenge is not just for getting that massing up, and where comes the role, specific role of educational institutions is uh, both at the undergrad and the postgrad levels, the kind of water sensitivity and everybody's multidisciplinarity role of playing a very, very active role in the practice as practitioners, as managers, as as policy makers, that's missing even in my own campus, and I'm trying hard to build in. I've integrated at the level of Department of Architecture, where we have a lot of very interesting master's courses like urban regeneration and acoustics, which is looking beyond the scale of just the regular physical planning, and we are getting into that how can at various scales, and right from neighborhood to meso to macro scales, how all of these can be the traditional wisdom and knowledge, which is still
Yeah.
intact to a certain extent, can be clubbed with the post-colonial so-called modern systems, and a perfect marriage kind of a thing can be evolved. So having experiences with Bijapur as part of education studios, we have
My
made
worry
sure.
is, Hina, that if tomorrow CPHU was to make a policy, do we have enough practitioners to support that policy on the ground? You reflect upon that.
That's yes, that's something, that's what which is missing, and I personally feel we want more CACs, we want more of such every educational institution to prioritize it in getting across the streams. I mean, every kind of a course, both as a sensitive consumer as well as people who play an active role in terms of
But
plan
do
making,
you see
decision
any
making.
challenge in changing the curriculum, because curriculums are basically towards more networks and services, which are more traditional Victorian engineering design. In
And
India, we have not reviewed those.
so unlike the water sector, I think here it's more top down. So if the leader decides, it's very quick and fast,
Okay.
and it can immediately be done. So if the Ministry of Education wants this has to be seeped in across all curriculum, I think then it's very it's much
Fantastic. Fantastic.
acceptable. Yes.
So, Hina, I will come back to you again for the second question, where you can think about that. What are the immediate and long-term opportunities? These other two speakers, panelists who have spoken, they can also think. But in the meantime, I will go to Rajneesh, who is heading CSC's, green building and habitat program. And there was a discussion on campuses as well as, how the government functionaries can adopt this. I think we also work with Central Public Works Department. So Rajneesh, can you tell us that how in your sustainable habitat and green building program, these case studies would help?
Thank you, Sureshji. And I think it'll be interesting. The word where we started is the sensitivity towards the water. And now when I look at this word called sensitive, then sensitivity or working towards sensitivity comes with something called wisdom. So moment the wisdom is required to become like whatever you need on ground, you need to have an effort coming along with. Now the problem is like Indian cities or maybe any of the city civilizations were very sensitive because they were effort driven, or they were like having wisdom with them with regard to the water and how to plan for it, how to work for it. But now, unfortunately, what has happened is this wisdom part or effort part has been moved to centralized function. Moment it has moved, the hands-on experience of how to deal with this water and how to work with this has got limited to only few people in the society. Now, and this the few losing the wisdom is going to be something which is very dangerous, and we've reached to that stage. Now, what we are trying through these case studies, which I've seen, which is a synergy between India and Australia and all, it's a celebration of effort. It's a celebration of effort, which of all what is happening in India as well as in Australia. And that becomes a kind of showcase to the people, because this is the kind of a dying wisdom which needs to be now coming back to the society. And moment it's there back into the society, people are sensitive. Like, for example, I am sensitive towards the quality of water which comes to my house. So maybe I have a decentralized treatment system at my home, but I do not have an effort to do a decentralized water management at my home. Because I found, so it depends on an urban science and knowledge which is there with the people. So people do have taken an effort, but the effort has been towards maybe the not onto the quantity, but onto the quality of water. And
so let me just
similarly,
interrupt you here. That that's fine. That at individual household level, these perceptions would be little difficult to accept and adopt. But however, what is the challenge in the campuses where basically public buildings, public building, you work with CPWD and other people? Why can't big campuses and big infrastructure projects, build housing projects, do that? Office complexes, institutions, because we start talking about, so it's a high density, small household, they will not do that. But what is the problem with the campuses?
See, campuses, the problem currently what we, not in the new design, as in any case, Hina has mentioned that there are a lot of new campuses like even Nalanda universities, or we are moving towards, the science is moving toward net zero water, waste and energy. So it's not only water, we are even moving toward net zero water and waste. Even the bylaws, the new condition under environmental impact assessments are pushing everything on a decentralized mode. There's no problem. The issue which is mainly which we are facing right now, first of all, the infrastructure which is already there with us. So the new development could be made towards that, but the existing infrastructure which we have, retrofitting that becomes very difficult problem. The reason for that is, for example, if you look at the human nature as well as the water nature, the way the water associate with surrounding, it becomes a dirty or a pure water automatically. Now the land uses or the kind of infrastructure or what we calling is about the blue or the green infrastructure has not been placed in our old developments with a very sensitivity towards it. Now, when you do retrofitting, you actually do not celebrate that water. You try to just shield that water away from all the pollutants which is around on this.
Yeah, but I think Australian case study by Caroline did show that, stakeholder and community and celebration is a good experience. And in India also, we need to imbibe that and move away from only institutions handling, only the engineers or, planners just deciding how the city will organize, but they have to work from planning stages with people. I think that's very important. So let me take, in the interest of the time, I would say the second question: what are the immediate and long-term opportunities? So can you, at different scales and greenfield, some part has been already covered in the first question, but Chaurasya ji, are you still around? And if you can tell us that, what do you see immediate and long-term opportunities? Do you want to reflect? And these should be short interventions because
yes, Doctor. Simply, I would like to mention that since the government has set target for 100% treatment of wastewater and also covering all households with tap water, and also because of this flooding situation, they are sensitive about managing stormwater drainage also. So opportunities are huge in the sense that how to find out low-cost solution which is maybe even localized and community is involved. I heard Mr. Rajneesh, I think there is one very important point that in case of Swachh Bharat mission, we see that bulk waste generator also manage their waste. Individual people also contributed to the extent they can do. Here, individual household, we cannot expect that they will properly treat, purify. But if they store some storm water and reuse it for non-potable purposes, it is as good as saving water and that is treated water coming to them. So I find huge opportunities there. Only we have to deliberate more on it, come out with solutions and examples as Bhatnagar ji mentioned, so that it is easily confidence is expressed and things are mainstream in our implementation program. Thank you very much.
It does include in CPHU a chapter on good practices WSUDP, but to detail that out, do you think immediately there is a need because of increasing incidences of floods and groundwater decline? Do you think we are ready for an advisory and a technical guidelines which details out more about planning to designing and operation maintenance cost and all those things? Do you think there is an immediate possibility of that?
I think, yes, there is one possibility to develop one advisory around this and how to scale up at city level, starting from maybe some of the institutions and commercial centers, and then scaling to city level over the time. I think there is huge opportunity and we should start working on it from all corners.
All the urban local bodies look towards CPHU, that that's the Bible and that's the Gita for all those guidance. So we will work with you on this.
Thank you.
All the three panelists, what are the short-term and immediate opportunities? The quick ones, 1 minute interventions. You want to go, Manuji? Any immediate opportunity you see with this partnership can bring in?
Yeah, Suresh, what is happening is that we are working on Delhi Master Plan 2041, and we see that there is a lot of opportunity in greenfield areas which are to be coming up in the near future. Concepts like zero discharge, far greater component of wastewater recycling. We have worked out that about 60% of the water can be recycled. And these are some of the opportunities which will occur. Also, if you recall the work which we had done for Delhi way back in '95, we had spoken about value channels in the landscape. Value channels being those old stream courses, which are very good recharge areas. Now, these are picked up by satellite imagery, and we hope that these will now be in the new greenfield part of Delhi, and be integrated in the land use plans as groundwater sanctuaries. And these would then be married to the urban stormwater flows, and also around the year with the treated wastewater flows. So this is a large scale opportunity which I foresee, which can happen. And this is, these concepts should be taken all over India. In
the first webinar you were not around, but CSC has documented the potential of 17,000 parks which are already existing, how they can be redesigned to also decrease the stormwater runoff, and there is a report which has been released. So that can help you in the Delhi master plan if you are involved in that process. That would be interesting. So Hina, a quick one from you, and then Rajneesh after that. Any opportunity in academic world to see how we can scale up? At what scale? And
yes, academia, institutions like Central University, Jamia Millia Islamia, if we have more of collaboration with Australian universities and research centers on application of the various tools and techniques which we don't apply here. The knowledge is very much similar on both sides. So we can run into both short-term, medium-term, and long-term intensive capacity building engagements and application of such tools and techniques in different contexts, which will be a learning exercise for both across. And parallelly, we can also support in terms of capacity building of all across the stakeholders, including policymakers.
Thank you. Rajneesh, anything you want to add in this?
Yeah, education look at 20 years ahead, and I think Australia, where currently they may be 20 years ahead because the problem may not become very critical in the country at this stage. So education, codes, and practices. These are the three areas where there are a lot of overlap which will come, because the practices will take away all the ifs and buts from our mind. And then codes, in any case, will make that more practical or more applicability on the ground. And education will give us those right engineers, right methodologies, and the people on ground who will make this effort definitely come.
So, good for the inputs. Thank you a lot for all the panelists. First webinar we had people coming up saying that we could possibly explore 2 cities examples, one in India, or few cities in India and few cities in Australia, and twinning opportunity to learn from each other. So that was also very important, and we will see that how we can take this forward. And we would like to hear from we have Mr. Gopa Kumar. Am I correct, Gopiji?
Gopi
Shankar. So would you reflect upon that, how basically because this program was funded through Victoria government, and you represent them, and how do you see that this partnership going ahead, and how we can to you for 2 minutes? Yeah, please share with us.
Sure. Thank you everybody. I'm sorry I missed the first webinar because I had another commitment, but I really regret having missed that, going by the panel of the quality of discussions and presentations we had here. So my name is Gopi Shankar. Harry, if I can have my slide over. And I represent the state government of Victoria, Australia, in India. I'm based in India, here in Bangalore. And Harry, my slide, if you don't mind, please.
Sukanya, can you have the slide for...
Yeah, just coming through.
Yes, just my last slide, I think, yeah.
Last slide, please.
Okay. So my name is Gopi Shankar. I head up trade and industry in the state government of Victoria office here in India. We are based in Bangalore. We have 2 offices in India. And we've been fortunate to partner with Alluvium to deliver this webinar over 2 editions. And we see that there have been quite a few action points that emanate from this. So I'll be connecting with Harry next week to see where we go from here. So this is not definitely a one-off activity for us. It's definitely beginning of a journey, beginning of a discussion, a conversation, and look forward to working with all of you to take this, to the next level. So just to give a brief introduction to Global Victoria. So Global Victoria is the agency I represent. It's an export development and investment attraction agency of the Victorian government. So we are part of a Victorian government department back in Melbourne, and we have 23 international offices across the world, across all continents, clustered around key export markets for Victoria. And the role of these offices is basically to help Victorian companies, and Alluvium is a classic example, to export and do business into these markets, as well as attract investment from these markets into Victoria. And in India, we had 2 offices. We've had Bangalore office for about 15 years now. And the mandate of these offices is to service all of South Asia, though we are based only in Bangalore and Mumbai. And we offer tailor-made services to Victorian companies to explore these markets, enter, operate. And our services include, market entry advice, intel, connections, relationships, regulatory advice, and networking support. And we advise and support both individual companies as well as trade missions. And of course, as you've seen from this activity, it is not limited to, just assisting companies to export, but also, fostering dialogue and discussions between stakeholders in both the countries. And we also work in reverse, in the sense we also work with Indian companies that want to identify partners and suppliers in Victoria. When I say partners, it could be, for developing commercial engagements, but also academic engagements. I heard Dr. Hina Zia talk about engagements between Jamia Millia and universities in Australia. That's a dialogue that I'll be happy to pick up later with you and then discuss further. And in terms of what is the support that's available in addition to all the government support by the way of hand-holding, knowledge, intel connections, all that is available. There are also a couple of funds that are available, grants and funds that are available for fostering research collaboration between India and Australia. And this is not limited to just to Victoria. It's more of a federal government and central government initiative. One is the Australia-India Strategic Research Fund. It's been running for 13 years now, and it's one of the largest bilateral research fund that India has with any country, not just Australia, but any country in the world. And it's an annual application that opens up once in a year around August. This year, of course, it's opened and closed. And this year, given the current environment, it was focused entirely on COVID. But usually there are areas like water. That is one of the areas identified for research between countries. It's a competitive fund. I mean, you'll have to bid for the fund, and the strongest applications get grants. And of course, it calls for institutions from Australia and India to come together to bid for the funding. And the other funding, again, this year it's been put on hold because of COVID. But keep an eye, be in touch, and as soon as the applications open, those of you who are interested, I'd be happy to give you an alert. That's the Australia-India Council grants, and these are committed to supporting people-to-people and institutional engagements between Australia and India. And this is not limited just to academic collaborations, also to pilot programs. So if you identify a small pilot and need some support from that, this is something that can assist you. And of course, there are other funds like the direct aid program, which the Australian High Commission and the consulates in Mumbai, Chennai offer every year. And these are small funds, they're not a lot of money, $10,000 or $20,000, but very, very useful for running very small pilots. That in short is basically the support that's available.
Thank you.
Of course, we are very committed to growing the relationship and look forward to working with you to take this. Thank you.
Gopi, this is fantastic. What is required is, when the new partnerships start, there is also a requirement. This is a knowledge partnership. This is not a commercial partnership.
That's right.
But then this partnership requires for trust building, accountability mechanism, both sides. So these grants and funds for research collaboration, you are saying, because it's a knowledge partnership first. We are looking at the similar problems which Victoria went through, and how do we learn from that? So I'm looking forward to this, scaling up our potential partnership through your offices also, and let's see how we can take this agenda forward.
Sure.
So, Harry, can I give it to you to close? And I think we should take not more than 2 minutes to just close, because I think we are already overshot time and it's 12:15.
Absolutely, Suresh. Thank you.
But we also have to do the poll, remember that.
Yes, the poll is currently on. We will just have a short survey at the moment, 3 questions. People, before you leave today, if you can just answer the short poll, 3 questions, that'll be much appreciated. So we've come to the end of the 2-part webinar series. Thank you very much to the audience who have joined us. I hope it's been useful and you're now more informed about water-sensitive cities principles, approaches and techniques. This very much has been the objective of this knowledge partnership in improving people's understanding of this. I think on behalf of the three organizations here, Alluvium, the CRC for Water Sensitive Cities, and CSE, we thank the panelists who have come to the two webinars and have shared their insights. So thank you very much to all the panelists. Thank you for the speakers for making time to share their journey and their work. And I would also like to thank the Victorian government who have helped to sponsor this event, and to Gopi Shankar for his team as well to help fund this event. I think on this note, I will leave it here, except to keep a lookout for this knowledge partnership. We are looking at future activities and future knowledge exchange activities, and we will be in touch very soon.
Thank you. Thank you from CSC also to both side teams who have worked over 1 month period extensively to put this together. Alluvium, CRC, WSC, and CSC team. Everybody, thank you a lot. So can Shivali and Tarika, who are handling the poll, can do the
Yeah, we need 30 seconds more, then we'll release the results.
Sure.
We're giving 30 seconds.
So, yeah. So there are 3 questions, am I correct? And then there are multiple answers to that, and you can take. I also take this opportunity to thank the government departments who came on board as supporting partners, Namami Gange National Mission Clean Ganga, and Amrut Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, because we assist them as Center for Excellence on Water Sensitive Design and Planning, and Department of Urban Development and UP government, who were part of this process. So I think I would like to also put on record saying thanks to all the government agencies who came on board and showed their support. In fact, the first webinar, we actually had all the senior officials sitting through all the proceedings of the webinar and contributing.
So we have the results, and now we can close after looking at the results.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, people. Stay safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Shivali, Sukanya, and Tarika for putting this together. Harry, we connect later on separately. Bye. Bye, Caroline, Dan.
Great.
And Malcolm.
Thank you.
Bye.